I know not care about no Nikes.
Nikes. Vikings with Nikes on them.
Yep.
Nice. Someone write that down.
I'm all about that.
My next series.
I'm all about that weird niche artwork that nobody draws. That's what I'm about. I'm about that. And speaking of which, let's get into it. Questions. I got answers.
Did you get to work with H.R. Geiger before he passed away?
Nah.
Okay.
Big influence though. I get approached a lot to work on stuff that's like that because my work resonates in that direction, in that general direction.
Mm-hmm.
But no cigar.
Okay.
Sorry to disappoint.
Yeah.
I'm not that old. How dare you?
Well, you don't have to be old. It's just.
How dare you?
Oh. I mean, it's a matter of opportunity.
How dare you? I'm 12 years old, dude.
You know, that brings me to another question. How old?
Puberty hit you like a bus.
Actually, my voice did get super deep when I was like 13, 14. So
That's good.
I know it's a kind of a joke you were getting at, but like in real life, it actually did happen. Like I had a very deep voice, very, very young. I was
How old were you when you started your first concept art job?
25, 26.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I think that's right. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, around that time. Absolutely, actually. I'm almost convinced that's true. Yeah. And now I'm 12 years old. Then went backwards.
And kind of Benjamin Button to that.
Yeah. But anyway, any other questions?
I think I have a question.
Let's do it.
It's something that we were discussing before the classmates.
Cool.
I think it was with the propeller project we were struggling on putting it was a theme of pushing the final design. More specifically, like we were staring at this design for so long for a couple of. I think it was a week that we started doing this, and we were kind of getting stuck, like seeing the same thing, and it was like, especially for me, I was feeling that I was doing a good job, but I was kind of getting sick and tired of seeing it. How do you overcome that?
I don't think this is going to be a good answer, so I'm going to give it to you anyway, though. I just do.
Is it?
Yeah. I think it's a perspective thing for me, right? Like the reason why I'm giving you the answer this way, along with like a lot of answers that are very similar, because this is the kind of thing that I don't want to lie. You know, like something similar. I think like when asked in previous week, it's like, how did I do this, or what methodology did I do to get good? Remember whenever we would have those types of discussions and I would just be like, I didn't have a thing, I just went, you know, and I think it's important to think about that. And this is another one of those things, right? Which was that like, the way you have to think about it, again, it's perspective, is that if you have a job, right, and you're asked to do, I don't know, like Greek mythology, right?
Oh yeah.
For like 6 years because you're working on this project for that long. You know what I mean? Like that's the job. You're working on like, I don't know, God of War. Like God of War took like 5 years to be developed. You understand?
Oh yeah.
And so this idea of like how do you get over it? It's kind of like you just have to. And I think if you think of it as a perspective as like a job or a path in which you're trying to become, you're trying to get a career in this, and you don't have this mentality, like you have this kind of attitude of like getting bored too easily, or you have this kind of mentality of just like not putting your heart into it after a few years. This is very common, by the way. You're gonna see that a couple things will happen to you, or you'll see this happen to other people, which is the grass is always greener, meaning that everybody thinks that working somewhere else or doing something else is better, and then they get there and it's the same, right?
Yeah.
Or like I said, you get the job, you do the stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're just kind of like complacent and you don't really push yourself. Okay. So here's what I've done though, now that I've told you kind of like that I don't get through it. I don't have like a method that's like gets me through it, right? I'm a soldier, like my boss tells me to do something, I say, yeah, okay, let's do it. I consider it as part of my job, me being professional, right?
Has that ever happened like to other let's say coworkers or people that you met that as you were saying, they do what they have to do and they put their hearts to it in the beginning, but
Yeah, absolutely.
something happens along the way and they fall off of art?
Yeah, very consistently, actually.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, I think that's just human nature. This is what I'm getting at, right?
But yeah, because that's something that a lot of artist friends that I had was kind of scared of that, or was denying themselves, like saying, no, I'll never go out of art. I'll always love this. And I was like, always in my back of my head saying, well, I don't know, anything can happen in these next 10 or 5 years that might change your perspective. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to get at, like it happens to everybody and it's totally natural. But like the thing that I've done over the years, whenever this type of stuff would happen, where I would feel this way, I would just simply just do personal art.
Personal art?
Yeah, I would just do my own stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, and I would put some interest into that, or I'll like get a hobby or something. One thing that I tend to do consistently that I've done for many years now, that I'm starting to truly think that this is probably a lifelong journey of mine, is teaching. Yeah, I feel very, very complacent with teaching. Like I like it, and I continuously do it year after year after year. I do get a little burned out from time to time, but then I just take like a month or two off and then I get back into it, and it's like a good hard reset and I'm good to go for another 2 years or something, and so it's clear to me that this is like probably going to be a lifelong journey, but what I will say is like, jobs though, they come and go. Doing art in general comes and goes. Like I took like 2 years where I focus more of my time doing programming, and learning game development. This year I'm doing a lot more 3D and animation.
Would you say that if it wasn't for your hobbies of doing programming 3D you would have had just stuck in the painting side of things, you would have gotten sick of it?
No, that's what I'm trying to say is like I did.
Oh.
But you're asking me like, how do you get through it? And I'm telling you, I just don't. I just do. I just like do work. I constantly paint because I also understand that it's a skill in which I have to put time into. to become better and better and better.
But you do other stuff that way.
But I do other stuff, yeah,
Yeah.
that fulfill me, maybe that art doesn't do anymore. Right? There comes a point where you feel pretty competent, and that competency is what drives your lack of inspiration down. Right? When you actually start to feel like there's a little bit less of a challenge. Right? This is true for like video games too, right? Like if you start to just dominate everybody, you become more and more bored of it.
Oh yeah.
You know, so this is even for things that are designed to take your time and attention, and even those dwindle.
No, that makes perfect sense.
You know, like they're not like work, and yet those things people start to fall off of. You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, it's really just a matter of understanding that simple premise of like you just got to stick to it. Otherwise, otherwise you just get too caught up in how you're feeling and why you not feeling motivated about stuff again, and that kind of stuff is like I always talk about. It's just distractions. You know?
Yeah.
You need to like stop focusing on that kind of stuff. You need to focus on the kind of things that will help you move forward, not backwards. And so, yeah, I think picking up other hobbies or other interests is a good strategy. I always talk about how you guys should specialize and get good. Once you've gotten good and you're one of those individuals that, you know, had this hard question of like, but I like everything. Once you start getting good and have some sense of mastery and some competency and some professional, you know, experience, that's the time to then pick up those other things. You know? Like start to get good at environments maybe, or start to get good at 3D or whatever thing that you set aside because you're focused on trying to get good at this one thing. You know? But remember this professionalism part. That's the part that I think people still have like a hard time, you know, dealing with because they're so focused on the here and the now, and they want to always feel super inspired and what have you, instead of just, you know, realizing that you should just be, that you should just focus on what you can control, and your own internal motions need to be driven by reality and facts.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Versus like your inner monologue. Your inner monologue could lie to you, and it's very convincing. You know? Like there are people that believe that the earth is flat, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And so it's like how does this happen, you know? And it's easy to think that just people are stupid, right? Like it's like, oh well, people are stupid. I always say I feel like humanity as a whole, we're not that smart. Like collectively, I do think we are just a dumb species collectively, and I include myself in that collectiveness. I don't actually exclude myself. I think I also fall into these traps, right? And part of that is the kind of stuff that you see with like flat earth stuff, you know? And if we think about why people believe in flat earth and why people believe in all kinds of crazy conspiracies and stuff, it's because of those same insecurities that drive us to not push ourselves in art, or to get complacent. Always want to look for like that bigger calling. There's like a weird existential thing that happens in humans that we do this a lot. And you see a lot of religions and spiritual stuff like thrive in American history. It's because people are always looking for it, you know?
I thought the thing with flat earthers is what it was that the arguments sounded convincing. Like
Yeah,
they were always like BS, but they made it sound like twisted enough to make it sound convincing.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that confidence really drives people. They like to think that they are smarter and are more wise, and that they have the inside scoop, and everybody else doesn't know what they're talking about. Like everybody else has fallen into this conspiracy, right? Of like the Earth being a globe.
Hmm.
I had a friend who I respect dearly, and he came to me once, and he's like, "Have you ever heard like this flat Earth stuff? Like, what's your opinion on it?" Yeah, and I was like, "Yeah, it's kind of crazy, um, but yeah, it's like it is what it is. Some people just believe the Earth is flat, whatever." And and he's like, "Yeah, but have you watched those videos? Like, they're really convincing now, you know." It's kind of like what you're
Oh yeah.
saying, right? And I was like, "Yeah, of course they're convincing. That's why people they believe it." But it's clearly like not a thing. There's just too much evidence on the contrary. And he's like, "I don't know, man. Like you should watch some of these videos. And it's really kind of hard to like dismantle." And I was like, "Wait, are you saying that you believe that the Earth is flat?" you know? And he was like, "Well, no, I'm not trying to say that, but it's just like." But I could tell he was sort of kind of saying that. Yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah.
he was a little bit embarrassed if I was going to judge him, so he didn't want to get into it too much, you know. And I
Yeah.
was like, "Well, just talk to me about like why do you think they're so convincing?" And he would just go through his stuff, and I was like, "Yeah, but I can dismantle it pretty quickly for you, dude. Like, if we think of it as artists, like let's not
Oh
think
yeah.
about this as scientists. Let's think about this as artists. Like why it just can't be a thing." And I mentioned direct light versus spotlights. And
Hmm.
as soon as I said that, he immediately was like, "Ah, yeah, of course," you know, because he's a really good artist, and like I said, I respect him too. And so I didn't outright think he's dumb. I just think that he's right. It's very convincing, very compelling arguments. But I told him what drives me away usually is if there's enough experts and enough reliable information, like a lot of scientists and what you call it, engineers rely on the fact that the Earth is round to do a lot of their cool stuff, you know. So this idea that the Earth is flat on that usually makes me skeptical of the skeptics. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
I am an artist who's an expert at like lighting, rendering, design. I give you guys feedback on lighting, rendering, design. I say, anatomy, when you're drawing a human arm, it's really important to understand how the bicep works so that way you can bend the arm appropriately. And one of you guys coming out and being like, "There's no such thing as a bicep." And I'd be like, "What?" Like,
Oh yeah.
and just be like, "That's not like a real thing, dude." And then it's like, look at this person in this comic book art and how they're drawing what you call a bicep. It doesn't look anything like what you're saying it is. And it's like, "Well, yeah, it's because it's stylized." Oh, how convenient. It's like you could totally do that with anything, right?
Yeah.
And so like I was talking about like the point light, direct light stuff, right? And I was like telling him like that to me. So my first instinct is, what are like is there some like does it pass the smell test with experts? And uh the answer is not really. There's too many experts. There's too much science. Even like ancient humans like knew that the Earth was round. You know what I mean? And
Oh
so
yeah.
it's like it's just kind of like bizarre to kind of go backwards. But I used the point light example because I was like, let's imagine that there is a disk, okay, and then that we have the sun over here, you know, and if it's a point light, it would do this, right? Like the surface right here would be illuminated, but that's like if we were to look at it from the top down, it would be like that, you know.
Oh yeah.
And that would mean there would be fringes of the planet that would be in shadow that don't match up with the globe model, right?
Mm.
And I was like, that alone is like a huge sus, right? It's like, because even if you said that this goes underneath, well, then the whole earth would be in shadow at one point, meaning when we're in night, so is China, you know, but that's not the case,
Yeah.
right? But I said, but the point light example is just a good one in general, because you would still be able to see the sun even though it's night if it was truly flat, just like you can see a street lamp, you know, in a distance, even though you're not anywhere near it, right? You're not illuminated by it. You're in shadow, but yet you can see lights in the distance. And you're telling me that there's that much atmospheric perspective that we would not see the sun? You know, that's crazy, dude. And I pointed that out to him, but like as soon as I said, like I said, he immediately was like, I think he could feel like he's like getting duped, like he was a little duped.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, yeah, you're just looking at it like you're looking at it too complicated. That's why you're falling into that trap. You know.
Oh yeah.
Like the direct light model makes sense because direct light implies light coming in at a consistent rate, right?
Oh yeah.
And then if you think about the sun being a massive entity and the earth being tiny, I think about how far the sun is from the earth, like the light here, as straight as it is, and with the distance, would be very straight feeling, right? Even though it kind of isn't at like a microscopic level, it'll still be very radial, you know?
Yeah, and later on, the Bladders comment would say it's because of the chemtrails, man. The chemtrails caused that.
Yeah.
So
I have some friends who
fighting
believe
against
that
them.
chemtrails, yeah.
You also need to explain then that the sun is flat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so going back to this point, you know, like people lean into the insecurities and people will develop these narratives. And that's why I'm saying, like, if you just create like basic truths, fundamental processes that help drive you, like the reason why I think a lot of my lessons really stick is because I'm not lying, you know, I'm telling people like how it is. I am relating to their realities, right? Like for instance, a good mantra when it comes to like having excuses, I always say it's okay to have excuses. People have great excuses, things that actually hold them back. There's actually nothing wrong with having an excuse. The problem is if you have that excuse continuously and consistently for long periods of time, that just means you don't care, right? For instance, let's say you have like a huge family and you have to take care of you and your kids and your wife or your husband, whoever, right? That's like a legit excuse. That's a hard thing to do. Absolutely. But like if that same thing is true after years and years and years, that just means you're not making steps to try to change that circumstance. Doesn't mean that you should like divorce your wife and like exile your children or anything. It just means there are strategies to kind of make your life accommodated to this new style of life that you have, you know? Right? Like, so for instance, you know, talking with your wife about times where you can stay focused on art or making your kids involved in art, maybe finding that as a good tool to kind of do both, be with your children and engage in your artwork. Like, you know, be solution oriented is what I'm getting at, right? But it's okay at first to kind of be like, I don't have time because of these circumstances. You know, I think that's totally reasonable. It's just what do you do after you've recognized an issue? And I still think after, you know, a couple times of having an excuse, I think it's okay again, still, you know, it's just if you like 6 years later and you're still using that excuse, you know, it's like, that's a lot of time to not be doing the thing that you say you really want to do. Right. Like even if you spend an hour a day for like 6 years, let's say, as the example I brought in, that's still thousands and thousands of hours of practice. That's going to mean something in the long term. You know, remember when I was talking to Mauricio when I was like, never have a 0% day? That's kind of what I mean, you know? Like it's okay, like and not to pick on you, Mauricio, but I can use you as an example. Like, you know, he's moving and doing all like life stuff. Like that's totally fair. He's got a job. He's got to work. Absolutely, man. I've had many uh, uh, removals of the class. I had to change it over and over because of the reality. So I am very sympathetic to that. This is a thing. I believe you guys. You know, I'm not. I don't think it's helpful to be like, nah, dude, no excuses ever, because what that does is it sets up a situation and a philosophy of thinking that if you have an excuse, that there's something wrong with you, right? Like all these awesome people never make excuses, and it's just like I don't think it's a healthy reality. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think my lessons in my philosophy resonate with people because I touch into the reality. It's very relatable. You can be like, I do have excuses. I shouldn't feel bad about them. I should just be accountable. I should just be consistent. These are all reasonable pieces of advice that I can implement to my life today. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And it's not just reasonable, it's true. That's what's great about it. It's real. And I use plenty of examples. I use metaphors, uh, anecdotes, research, you know, tons and tons of examples. So it's not just my rhetoric, it's also rooted in some truth, you know?
Yeah.
Right? Like my buddy Vitaly, he built a mortal shell inch by inch, day by day. And then he made a hit video game
Oh yeah.
over a span of a few years.
We,
I remember
we
when he
needed
was first starting working on it too. He was asking me for advice with Unreal and stuff, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you can do this and that." And that was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
diligent, man. He's actually inspired me to kind of do the same.
Oh.
Yeah,
we,
because
we
he's
needed
right.
him we needed him the most when there was the drought of Dark Souls. Man, that was a great game. The Mortal Shell.
Yeah, but there's clearly a love for this type of genre. But he's a great example of like step by step, day by day, you know. And I've seen plenty of people do this over the course of my career, including myself. That's how I learned programming. I spent 2 hours every day at minimum, and I got really good at programming in a short amount of time. It was not because I am some sort of savant. I'm just really good at remembering what matters, you know, in terms of my investment of time. And I feel like a lot of people do not do this, and this is why they become anxious. This is why I come up with the terms like art debt and paying off your art bills. I'm sure you've heard me say this, right?
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
And it's because again, it resonates with people. So you just gotta like have philosophies, like remember very simple truths, things that are going to remind you of reality. I in my creature design class, I did this thing because the class is a little bit longer, and I did this thing where I would what you call it? I would hire them or fire them based off of the way that they were doing their work, right? But I would say it's okay though if you get fired. Just know that if this is a real case or real scenario, this is what would have happened to you.
Oh,
You-
I'm sorry. What did I miss? I just got back. I had to use the restroom. I see my work on the canvas.
I'm sorry. So what?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, what did I miss? Because I had to go use the restroom, and I see that my work is on your screen.
Is it?
Wait. Yeah.
Astounding work, Efren.
No, it's my. Been doing a painting.
Oh my God, I'm an idiot. It's my actual Photoshop file that was covering your stream.
I was like, what?
My God. Okay, I just moved that out of the way. Anyways, continue.
Okay. So like for this class, I basically gave them like a real case scenario of what a client would have said about the work that they turned in. And they had a couple students who I had to fire, right? I said, at this point, they would have been very displeased and probably would have been very candid about their displeasure, you know, and they would have let you go, right? And I said, but it's okay. And I was like, now here's the instructor hat coming on. This is what you should do, right? And this is what you should aim for. And what I'm trying to get across is that, like, you know, again, like that's the reality, you know, keeping them focused on what's real, right? People hire you to do a job, you got to do the job, right? It's just like, oh man, I heard this really great counter argument for why the WNBA women's basketball, these female athletes who are extraordinary, don't get paid as much as their male counterparts, right? Because on paper, it makes a lot of sense that it feels unfair, right? They're playing the same sport, they're doing kind of the same activity. Of course, maybe they're at a different athletic build. That's fine, but it's like it's still basketball at the end of the day, right? And to think that these ladies are just not getting a good cut uh, doesn't make as much sense. But then when you think about it in the way that this person was explaining, it's like, no, it's just because a lot of people don't watch women's basketball as much as they watch men's. You know what I mean? And that's why you would have, in that specific example, why it makes sense that there might be some sort of weird inconsistency. And he also mentioned, he's like, look, you don't even need men to watch it. Like if you just took all the women population and they all watched women's basketball, that alone would be enough, right? To kind of like make it competitive. And just to kind of counter the same argument, just so you understand, I don't have any agenda here. I believe women's soccer is the opposite, where there is a lot of appeal, especially when it comes to the World Cup. A lot of people tune in on women's soccer because they go to the World Cup versus the men's, right? Versus their male counterparts. In that regard, I do believe that there is some real argument there, right? And I feel the opposite in that circumstance. I think that there was another argument where people were saying, well, that's the contract that they signed. They made terrible deals. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, I'm not cool with that either, to be honest. You know? Like, it's like, well, they signed they signed that they can be slaves. Like, that's not the company's fault that they're not treating them like slaves. It's like, nah, dude, there is a certain level of ethics that we have to maintain regardless of what a contract says. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I do believe this. I think like if I'm like, oh yeah, you know, go ahead and like shoot me with, you know, rusty nails in my toes every day. I signed that contract. Let's do it. You know, there's a multitude reasons why that's unethical. One in which maybe I'm not mentally sound, you know, especially in that specific example. And so in the women's soccer, there's a good example, or there's a good merit to be like, maybe they didn't realize that they were really signing up for a very terrible contract, or maybe they didn't realize that they had any leverage at all, you know, right?
Oh yeah.
There's all sorts of good reasons. I think it's fishy because people love to defend companies. You know, it's weird. But like using the example of the women's basketball, I think there is a lot of like you don't know of female athletes in that field. Like it's hard to think of one, right? Where I can think of dozens, and I don't even like basketball in that way. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of a marketing problem there. There's a little bit of there's all sorts of reasons why that could be a problem. But to just think that it's straight up unfair, we gotta you can't always just lean in, you know. You gotta just look at the world as it is, right? And it lets you navigate a little bit better, especially if you're doing this with your own internal thoughts. And I always think that as long as you're not doing anything to hurt anyone, I think you're okay. You know, like if you're just like, my reality is as long as I punch babies, I feel good about making art. I would be like, you know, maybe just get some new insight. Yeah, there's a very controversial opinion that I have about pedophilia, right? Where when we think about people who have sex addiction or any kind of sexual tendency that might be a little out of their control, or any other kind of mental disease or mental disability, we're very sympathetic, right? Aside from a few, and one of them is pedophilia, right? Which is that if a guy or a gal has like interest in children, and let's say they know that it's bad, and they're very aware that it's unethical and it's immoral, and they try to do something about it, right? Even when that happens, people like get pissed still. Like they just don't want these people to exist at all. And I'm like, there's a difference between a pedophile and a child molester, is what I'm getting at, right? Where a pedophile is a person who's interested in a child, but doesn't necessarily have to act on it. And then a molester is someone who is also a pedophile, but acts on it. And that is clearly a bad news. And we need to like really be very accountable and strict on that, I think. But what I'm trying to get at is the reality is it's a mental disorder again. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And we're just treating it like some sort of just pure evil. And I think it's actually counterproductive. If you look at other stuff like drugs, like Oregon, like they like legalize all these drugs, and people are like, oh, here we go, you know? But they're not looking at the bigger picture, right? I remember I had this argument again with some of my good friends, and they're like, this is like this is even before this. And we were just talking about like opinions about like legalized drugs. And I was like, yeah, all drugs should be legalized, you know? And they're like, you're fucking nuts, dude. And I was like, no, like it's a number game, dude. If you look at the number of people who die from, you know, contraband drugs and drugs that are laced with other drugs, and it's just not regulated at any level, and it's completely demonized, there's actually more deaths that come from that than if you just legalize it, right? Meaning that it's not like people will stop getting killed by these crazy diseases, or sorry, drugs. It's just that it'll be more, there will be more opportunities to regulate or to monitor this type of stuff. There's a great example of like places where they were allowed to create situations where they can have like speakers and access, not like a camera or anything, but like just some sort of miniature access to bathrooms where drug addicts would usually go and like do their drugs, you know? And a person like a clerk could be like, hey, are you okay? Like check in on them, right? And if they don't get a response, then they'll like go inside the bathroom and knock on the stall and be like, hey, you know? And then come to find out that person OD'd, call the ambulance will show up, get those person out, and it saved lives, you know? And so when you have like people that have to get these drugs through contraband or all these other means, you know, it actually creates a circumstance that becomes extremely dangerous, you know? Like a lot of the drug war and a lot of like the, what you call it, you know, even illegal immigration, you see a lot of that is they like try to people take advantage of that. This is true. This is a real thing. But I think they're doing different stuff now. I think they're actually just flying it in actual planes. They're not even crossing the border illegally, right? Because, you know, there's money to be made and they're going to figure it out one way or another, right? But let's say cocaine is just legal, right? Like you can just go like 7-Eleven and get some cocaine. Like how are the cartel going to like sell illegal contraband now, right?
Oh yeah.
So there is actually like the bigger picture solves a lot more problems. Now I'm not saying that I think that these are all absolute answers to all these problems. I'm just saying like whenever people have these reactions that are maybe not based entirely in reality, it makes them make poor choices, right? And so if I was to come all the way back, bring this all the way back to art, right? Talking about pedophilia acceptance and drug abuse acceptance. I'm just saying we can have a better conversation. That's all. I'm not even condoning this behavior. I'm just saying we can have smarter and more productive ways of solving these issues, right? Because I do consider them as issues. Art is like the same way in terms of like, if you think about getting better at art and you come to me with these types of perspectives that, you know, that are actually, you know, harbored in like this idea of like insecurity and not based off of real reality, like, right? Like if you remember if you draw every day and you stay consistent every day, you will get good. And then you do stuff that makes you not draw every day because you say, well, it sucks today, or oh man, like this other artist is so much good, or my work's not great, or I'm feeling bored, right? Like all these things that are true. But you have to also remember what's true is that if you're not drawing every day, you're not staying consistent, regardless of how much time, right? Remember, no 0% day, right? Like spending time in general is what you need to do. Oh, wait, hold on just a second. Delilah. Hey, Delilah, go change your pajamas. It's time for bed. I'm going to go put you guys to bed soon.
It's not time to go to bed 5 more minutes.
Oh, my God. Get out of here, boy. Delilah, hey, stop playing. I got to get going soon. But, like, do you understand what I'm saying, though? Like,
Oh yeah.
change your
Yeah.
pajamas.
Just change them and then.
Yeah, and come to my bed and just lay and wait. And so that would be my advice, is just always remember like this base of reality. It's really helpful. And you can shift it too. Don't ever think that you always have the 100% truth. Like if new pieces of information come back, so going back to like the drug abuse stuff, like for instance, Oregon's doing it, right? So if like we,
Oh yeah.
okay, go lay down in my bed. Tell your brother too. If we go and wait like a year and we just have this huge tick of overdosing and like crime and all this stuff, then I'm going to be highly skeptical of the solution. You know, of course I have to be, because my ultimate goal is that I don't want people to get hurt, right? Even with the pedophilia example, like good programs, for instance, is letting people feel accepted for these like ailments and having places where they can, potentially talk about it, that they feel safe, their life is not being threatened, and they can try to reform and maybe find some ways to just manage this behavior, even if ultimately they're not, because it's like, it's like any other kind of thing. You just can't like cure it, right? Like some people are very depressed and it's just like this how they are, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But like if there's like a place, but again, if like that, let's say that was created and this was more accepted and people were okay with it, and then but then the increase of child molestation went up, then I'm like, all right, no, like that, we need to try a different thing. But I'm actually pretty confident that would actually be really helpful then, because for the same reasons as drug stuff, right? Because it's so secretive, and it's like so taboo. Like people have, like some people just have no outlet, and the only other outlet is to be criminals, right? And that part is what I don't like, I don't enjoy. But anyway, getting back to the art though, like this is what I'm getting at. Like just if you feel like there's new information that changes your opinion about stuff, then do it. Like if you find out like this is how I can like suck it up, and this is a really good tool, then awesome. Maybe when you're asked this question personally in the future with other artists like studio who are looking up to you and want advice, you'd be like, this is how I manage this, and it's very practical, it's very reasonable advice. I think that's great. For me, there's just some stuff that I just know, like I just look at the world, I look at how things are, and I'm just like, it's clear to me, I just got to do it. And I'm really good about that diligence. Like I don't need like some sort of like, oh, I better do this to kind of help me. Like I just do it if I know I have to do it.
Yeah.
And I know it's not as good advice as it should be, but that's just why I tend to tell people that, because I want them to not have any disillusion that I am doing something secret that they aren't doing. No, everyone here is capable of doing it. It's just how much are you going to try, But anyway, let's take like 2 more questions. I did a lot of talking. I didn't do a lot of answering questions. Apologize. Turned into kind of a miniature podcast.
I think I got one.
There you go.
Is it even a Q&A session if Zane doesn't ask a portfolio question?
Never knew.
I guess at the end of the day, I kind of looking for opinions about staying objective while portfolio building. Because, okay, a good explanation here. So I generally, my designs are a little stagnant. And I mean that to say that they're not like super dynamic or evocative. Like they're just kind of clear and, they're very legible and over explained sometimes. And I've been given to understand that that's a good way to present information to a modeler. Like having clear design rather than evocative design. I mean, naturally a good design is supposed to be both, right? But if your sensibilities lean one way or another, there's strengths to both. Bearing in mind like what a concept artist is supposed to do, like if this piece here is a little bit more a bit more illustration heavy as opposed to like concept heavy, like I don't know, I'm using a lot of words here and I'm not covering a lot of ground. How do you discern?
Guys, I'm still in class. Lay down, please.
Do you have any opinions about discerning what a good portfolio piece is? And I suppose I'll just specify for a concept artist as opposed to an illustrator or for an environment designer or something like that.
It's I think I made this point before, but it's solving a problem. Like it's answering a question. You know what I mean? And so that could be done more illustratively, or it can be done with very clear line art or something. But the idea is that it has to be solving a problem, right? So for me, let's say if I was to present this as a portfolio piece, then this is just part of one problem that's being solved. But I tend to use this type of illustrative stuff as a way to get more people to follow me and to become fans of my work. But I also can use this as a kind of a piece to help inspire a team to be like excited about the prospects of the game or movie. But the thing is that I also am like looking at this thinking like, but nobody can make this into a game because of how illustrative it is. It's really going to be a challenge, except for me, right? And so I try not to make this like a final image, but it can definitely drive inspiration and motivation to aim for something like this, you know. But in terms of this purpose, it's to just get people inspired and motivated, right? Instead of like solving like some larger scale modeling problems, right?
Sure.
But luckily I can take a drawing like this and make it look more legible and maintain a lot of that feel that we got from the illustrative version, you know? And I found that like people who are building concept portfolios don't do that enough. And then that's where they get confused, because like the client will maybe ask them to do stuff like this. And then when they finally start putting into the game, into 3D models, like it just doesn't pan out, you know? And they're just like so confused why, right? And it's because, like I mentioned, like the design was never really intended to be modeled, right? It was more to just have, like you said, evocative reaction. So you just got to remember, like you got to keep your eye on the prize. And so building a portfolio, I think a good combination of both is not a bad idea. Okay. But understanding why that's not a bad idea to have a little bit of both. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with that being said, I do think that it's safer to just have images that can speak to modeling and texturing and all that stuff, as well as like I could see like this isn't so expressive. Like I could totally see this being modeled. Like I can't imagine this being that challenging, right? I think in fact some modelers would try to tackle this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with that being said, I think having a little bit of both is pretty safe.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, like a good methodology is don't limit yourself for no real reason. Don't be like, oh, I better just do very rigid drawings versus more illustrative. Like, if you want to do both, I think that's fine. You know, you just got to remember that takes time. Each of those takes time and effort to get good at, but it's totally within your ability to get good at both. As long as you stay in the genre, it makes a lot of sense that you can do both, right? Like characters and creatures, right? Like,
Sure.
it's less about the design now; it's more about the process, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
All right, I got to roll out here, guys. I appreciate you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this last demo for y'all. Enjoy painting it. And I just want to say I'm very proud of your guys' progress, your guys' ability. Hope you guys stay focused. Don't be strangers. And it's been a great pleasure and honor. Hope you guys the best. And have a great Thanksgiving. If you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, then have a great couple of days. And then I'll see you guys around, and Happy New Year. Cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Thank you
AJ.
so much, AJ.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
care.
It's been a
See you
pleasure.
around,
Take
AJ.
care.
Pleasure, guys.
Latest, friends.
Bye.
Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to watch more in the future. If you liked the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you like this content, you can go to my website, robotpencil.net, where you can find mentorships, tutorials, and a Patreon to get more exclusive content. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in my next videos.